Hey everyone, thanks a lot and welcome to today's Metal Connect. Every week we feature one of our incredible speakers that has basically shared time with us, their wisdom, their knowledge, and what they have done, their challenges. And today I'm honored to introduce Cary Fowler. Cary has been an important human in the whole idea of sustainability and making sure our planet could feed itself as we move forward. I met Cary in 2008 in Seoul, South Korea. He was one of our featured speakers at the Seoul Digital Forum. Prior to that, I saw Cary's speech at the TED event. Yeah, I think I saw you, Cary, at TED, maybe it was Long Beach?
No, Oxford in England.
Okay, so I didn't see you in Long Beach then. I saw, and then 60 Minutes, which I popped up, and it was incredible watching a 60-minute speech. And the goal was I wanted to meet Cary, and I used the event, the Seoul Digital Forum, to bring Cary into my life. Since then, Cary continues to just dazzle us what he's doing. Besides challenging the planet, he's challenged his own self, recovering from cancer. He lives in this incredible location in New York, which hopefully I'll give you a bird's eye view of what that looks like. Cary is joining us. It's late on his side. It's after 10 o'clock, so it's an honor to have him join us. Cary, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Ken. I really look forward to it.
So Cary, how do you describe yourself in 3 words?
Well, you know, on Wikipedia, they say I'm an agriculturalist, and I don't think I'd ever heard of that word before I saw it on Wikipedia. So I thought, well, I'll just stick with that. But I'm a stubborn guy from the American South.
Yeah. Tell us where you're from.
I'm from Memphis.
But what's that mean? When someone says they're from Memphis, and if you see another person from Memphis, you guys know. What is the gusto of someone from Memphis?
Well, you know, I think we are generally pretty calm people, but you don't want for us to get our back up. And we try to be gentlemanly and courtly.
But. Okay, got it. You're wrong side, wrong place. What do you call someone from Memphis? Someone from Chicago, Chicagoan, LA.
Memphian.
What's it called?
A Memphian.
A Memphian. There's a good quiz question, a Memphian. Yeah. Well, this Memphian, how would Svalbard, literally the other side of the top of the planet, even pop onto your radar?
Well, in a couple of ways. You know, it popped on professionally because I knew some things happening up there that were a bit relevant to my field. But then also, I actually moved to Norway in 1990. Ended up getting married to a Norwegian, and I lived there for 15 years. So it was, you know, part of my life. Not in Svalbard, but in the lower mainland of Norway.
So I want to give everybody an idea that's on this call. When we say the other part of the world, let me just share my screen. And as we zoom out, so I'm right now in the Los Angeles area, and we can kind of see, and we're zooming out. Boy, I wish I had this superpower where we could actually do what I'm for real. And you would fly, which we did, across the United States, and we landed in Oslo. Actually, we landed in the UK first, in London, as we're getting there. A little slower resolution. So we landed in London, and from London, then we took a jump over to Oslo, spent the night in Oslo, and a 2.5-hour flight over Norway takes you to this spot right here. This is Svalbard. Now, Svalbard is the most northern what, Cary?
Well, it's the farthest north, almost everything. Commercial airport, the most northern bar, village, kindergarten, indoor swimming pool. There are about 2,000 people that live there in Longyearbyen.
And I believe it's got the second largest wine collection of all of Europe.
Yeah, the largest one for Scandinavia.
Blows your mind when you're there. You
got to do something, Ken.
But it's a very surprising place when you get there. It's a very cultured location.
Yeah.
There's a university there that attracts a lot of young audience.
Yeah, well, it's not a degree granting university, but it's a university center where researchers from other universities in Europe come mostly to do graduate research.
And if I remember, the reindeer weren't necessarily typical type reindeer, are they?
No, they're unique to that place. They're kind of short and stocky, and
Not, they don't fear humans at all.
not much, though. They seem to come into the village during hunting season because you can't shoot a rifle in the village.
Yeah, they feel safe there.
They're smart enough to do that, and they're more, as you know, more polar bears than people in Svalbard.
Yeah, another thing I'm going to show you, and this was when you get to the airport, you see this, everyone. Let's see if I could show this picture. I hope that pops up. Can everyone see that? Is that coming through, Cary?
Yeah, it is. Mm-hmm.
So this here gives you an idea of how far you are away from everything. You are at the top of the world, so far north, everyone, that you're more northern than the northern lights. That's how far north you are. So Cary, he came to Metal, he spoke at Metal, and at the end of his talk, he basically dared us. I dare you, if you want to somehow muster a few of you and come to Svalbard, I will give you a tour of the Seed Vault. And he went almost like an evil scientist. Ha, 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 ha. They'll never take me up on that. Sure enough, we did. And it was, I've been to over 100 countries, Cary. It's one of my favorite places in the world. And Svalbard has a very unique feel, and it's an uncountry in most respects, isn't it?
Yeah.
How do you describe an uncountry?
Well, it's under Norwegian sovereignty, but it's really governed by a treaty that involves about 40 countries. So you have this tiny little mostly Norwegian village, which is where we went. But you also have a Russian mining village up there and a Polish weather station, and everybody sort of gets equal access, but under the rules that Norway makes. And it's a demilitarized zone, by the way.
Yeah, and when you say there is a Russian outpost there, it is like the old CCCP type Russia. I mean, USSR, old school.
Oh, definitely. Statue of Lenin.
We snowmobiled there, and it felt like you went back 60 years ago, and it was incredible.
Yeah.
But this is all on this island. And the unique principle of this island for you, Cary, was permafrost.
Yeah, it was a combination of a couple of things. One was permafrost, really cold. The second was it had great infrastructure. And the third was it was remote but accessible. And when you think about it, there are not a lot of places in the world that fit that bill, particularly the remote but accessible. So all those things provided safety for anything important you wanted to do up there. And the cold supplemented any kind of mechanical refrigeration we might need for longevity for the seeds, freezing them.
Now let's go back to that. Were you involved in storage of seeds prior to this? Were you involved in the other? So most people don't know this, but there are seed vaults or seed banks all around the world, right?
Yeah. And I think, Ken, you've kindly on more than one occasion said this was a big, audacious idea, but I'll have to admit that the most audacious part of it started many, many years before that. And I think it's important for people that are on the line now to understand that you don't just go to the top of the world and build a seed vault inside of a mountain and get all the countries in the world to send you a copy of what's in their seed bank. Nothing would ever work that way. And frankly, if you were in this field, you wouldn't start off thinking that. It wouldn't be in your imagination. So let me just quickly mention about 3 or 4 things that had to happen before you could ever even imagine having a seed vault in Norway. The first was you need a legal structure. You need a legal structure that sort of governs this resource and defines the rules of how countries share. And I was a young man when I went to Rome in 1978. And with another guy, we bought a ticket to Rome to go to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, where we started lobbying very audaciously, I must say, for an international treaty on crop diversity. that took, first we had to create a forum, so they created a commission on genetic resources, and the whole thing took about 22 years to create the treaty. So I was involved in treaty negotiations, and towards the end was actually chairing some behind the scenes negotiations of the key countries. And in the end, I think in 2001, I think it was the first international treaty of this millennium, about 140 countries or so signed on to the treaty. So you have an international framework, but what are you going to do with that? And the UN asked me to come back to Rome after that and to oversee their first assessment of the state of the world's genetic resources for agriculture, and to negotiate an interactive process for devising a global plan of action. And by the way, it was the first time in the UN system that we actually used the internet for communications and for, I put in quotation marks, negotiation. And I was ahead of that process, and the global plan of action for this resource was approved by 150 countries in 1996. Then we started to put together these seed banks, develop rules and standards, and supplement them in ways, and help them train and give them IT systems and all this kind of stuff. And finally, once you've got all that in place, you actually need money.
Right.
So we established the Global Crop Diversity Trust, which I was the executive director of. And it was structured as an endowment. So I was raising money. I was executive director for a little over 7 years, raising money, putting in an endowment fund, the idea of which was to generate stable, secure funding forever, for as long as you think you're going to need agriculture. Now, after we had done all that, then it was possible, psychologically and otherwise, to sort of take a step back and say, well, what are we missing? What do we need? And that's when we thought, well, wait a minute. The major seed banks, the ones that we really have got to protect, the ones that food security globally depends on, are located, well, one was in the United States in Fort Collins, Colorado. One was in Russia. But the really big ones and important ones were in Mexico, in Colombia, Peru, Syria, Nigeria, in India, and the Philippines, and Kenya, and Ethiopia. And all of a sudden we realized, wait a minute, these seed banks and the seeds in them are only as safe as those countries are safe.
Right.
And some of those have been having wars and civil strife and everything else. So long story short, we realized we need a plan B. And the great thing about seeds is you can duplicate them. You know, it's not like gold in Fort Knox. You can duplicate.
You have to say something. Some of those locations through war were destroyed. Floods were destroyed. So natural events and conflicts destroyed some of these seed banks.
Yeah, and also equipment failures. And I have to admit, a seed bank is a bit like a library. It's a lot like a library. It's a kind of a library of life, if you will. But libraries have librarians running them. And if you ask any librarian you know if they'd ever lost a book in their library, they would have to say yes. And if you ask any seed bank manager if he or she had lost a seed sample in their seed bank, they would have to say yes. So there was also human mismanagement and just normal accidents and everything. But you know, with a book, that's one thing. You lose a book in the library, you can probably go on Amazon and get another copy, or the publisher, whatever. You lose a sample of this crop diversity and you've just experienced extinction in most cases. So anything that was unique about that sample, that variety of tomato or wheat or whatever, gone forever. Well, you know, those are bad odds. I mean, you just don't want that ever to happen.
Right.
So we needed a plan B. And the idea was to find a location that was out of the way, so it wouldn't be in the middle of wars and civil strife and tornadoes and bad stuff, but yet it was accessible, and it had to be in a place and under a legal structure and under a political structure that was trusted. So you can quickly reel off in your head a whole bunch of countries where maybe we could have had a seed vault, but none of the other countries in the world would have trusted it being there.
Right.
Because a lot of these countries that are depositing seeds in Svalbard are depositing what they think of as a national heritage, something very precious. I mean, it's like loaning your National Museum of Art to somebody else. They really identify very strongly with these crop varieties, and there's a lot of political conflict and legal conflict over questions of ownership. So we had to navigate all of those kind of things, and we had to explain, how is this going to work
How much money do you
with
need to do this?
countless gene bank managers.
How much money would you need to actually open up this seed vault? Not a bank, but vault.
How much did it take?
Yeah, how much did it take?
Well, the construction cost I can translate it a couple of different ways. In those days, it cost about $9 million. And today in today's dollar and Norwegian kroner equivalent, it would be about half that.
Half that.
Yeah.
But getting this to where it was centered in a place to where the world actually watched it.
Yeah.
Svalbard was brilliant.
Well, it's a lovely place, and Norway, for a lot of reasons, some that you understand and some that are peculiar to this issue, was very well trusted by the other countries. And I must say, I mean, I had to get on the phone and visit most of these seed banks, and most of the seed bank directors had known me for about 20 or 30 years at that point. So, I couldn't exactly pull the wool over their eyes or do something screwy, because it was my career.
What was your career? Hey, by the way, just to let everyone know, I, while visiting there, and there's a bunch of people that are on this call that went to Svalbard. I see Jordan and Lloyd and Glenn. They all went on this incredible trip. We're going to ask Cary questions.
Hello, guys.
Hey, guys. Yeah, well, I mean, actually, Lloyd was probably the one that really made things happen. Lloyd was constantly communicating with everyone, put things together. Without Lloyd, we could have never done it. But Cary, I ended up, we all went there, and I sat in your car, your station wagon, and we drove to the seed bank, and you talked about the challenges, the time commitments, the parameters, going back and forth to Svalbard. And it became, because you lived in Rome during that time too, I believe, right?
I did. I was mostly in Rome.
Yeah, and that made it a lot easier than flying from the United States. But the vision of what it is today, is it similar to the vision that you had when you came up with this idea?
Yeah, pretty much. I think the real breakthrough, if we want to sort of narrow it down to the seed vault and keep the discussion there, the breakthrough was, not so much, let's say, the architectural design or anything. We knew we were going to put it in the middle of a mountain because that was where it would be most secure and cold. The breakthrough is really the management plan.
Right, because you have to do it for hundreds of years.
I mean, is there any business that's going today where the breakthrough isn't the management plan? If it's going to last for a very long time, you better have a good plan.
Yeah, but it's interesting because right now, Cary, if you entice us again to go to Svalbard, the odds of us seeing the seed bank is pretty weak, isn't it? Including yourself.
It's close to zero.
What happened?
Well, I don't know. I think, the Norwegians decided that they were, for no particular reason, there was no incident or anything that happened up there, but for some particular reason, they decided they were just going to install maximum security. And they put a lot of money into improving and strengthening the seed vault itself. So Ken, if you and Lloyd and others remember walking through that portal building, the part of the seed vault that sticks out of the mountain.
Here, I got some pictures I could share while you're talking.
Yeah.
Let me pop some of these up.
When you get to the, you got a lot.
So I'm a huge fan.
Okay, so that's inside the little portal building, and it's, I don't know, what, 50 yards long or 20
Well,
yards long.
let's see if I could go to the outside real quick.
Yeah.
It's a little, so by the way, this is what you see. This is the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. Guys, this is not just about the seed vault. We are going to talk about seeds, and we are going to talk about the idea of preserving what we have. I just want to give you an idea of what we experienced and why it was so important to all of us as we're in this environment, seeing what Cary has put together and looking at everything. There's the weather, there's the terrain, and I'm not sure how choppy that is, but you can just see it's desolate. It's an old mining town, right, Cary?
Yeah, it is. It's a coal mining town from around 1900.
And the outside of this, that's how the entrance area is. It's not huge, everyone.
No.
It's not huge at all. The thing is when you go inside, which I'm going to try to see if I can find this. This is the inside part. Doesn't look impressive at all.
No.
Where it gets impressive, oh, there's an old X. Let's see if I could give you.
I can see you've got a slide there. I wish I could help you with it.
Oh, you do? Okay, here, me.
You've got a slide of the tunnel. There you go. There. Yep, there.
That's the tunnel.
So Ken, before you get into the tunnel now, when you're in the little portal building, the slide that you showed before that, there's now literally a bank vault door.
Oh, right here there is.
Yeah, just before me there in the picture.
Wow.
And you know, it's like a foot thick. And there are many other doors along the way, and it's all very
there, right through there.
Yeah.
Gosh, I don't know where the by the way, how's that for a picture, Cary?
That's good.
Going, oh, I don't know. There is one I have where it actually shows all the seeds. Cary, we got in trouble, by the way. I did get naked in the North Pole, just to let you know. All right. Because no one's done it before.
I did send a picture to Jennifer. I don't know if you have those photos I sent you, but I did send one to her of the room with the seats.
All right, let me see what I have. I'll get back to that. So Cary, real quick before we dive into other topics.
Yeah.
The Seed Vault today is doing what it's supposed to do. The thing is, it's ultra secure. You can't even get in. That might change in the future.
Yeah, I hope so.
Your book,
yeah,
people can get. Seeds on Ice really goes through the whole idea. By the way, you signed it. Thank you, Cary. It is all around what the Seed Vault is, your mission. But you did start talking about the idea of preservation of seeds and us being very conscious of how our food sources have changed dramatically over the last centuries.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, most people don't really stop to think that the varieties of our food crops that we're eating today are almost in all cases not the same varieties we were eating when we were children. That's certainly the case with our major food grains, rice and wheat and such. And why is that? Well, that's because pests and diseases are not in the business of becoming extinct. They mutate, they launch better, more efficient attacks against rice and wheat. And rice and wheat are not part of the natural environment anymore. Their evolution is literally in our hands. So plant breeders have to breed new varieties to keep pace with the pests and diseases, with climate change, with any new traits that we might want in the marketplace. And they do that. How do they do it? Well, they don't do it by wishing it to happen. Nothing falls out of the sky. They go to the seed banks and they scurry through and find one of these old varieties that might not be a variety that any farmer would want to grow today, and maybe nothing that a consumer would want to eat, but that variety might have one trait that is really essential that the plant breeder wants in the future variety of rice or wheat. It might be a trait that gives disease resistance, for instance. So they're looking for that. And so you kind of think of the seed bank as holding all of the raw materials that define how agriculture and how our different food crops are going to evolve. It contains all of the options for the future. So if you begin to lose those options because of stupid mistakes or war or flood or whatever comes through a seed bank, you've lost options. And potentially you've even possibly lost the option that will keep that food crop being a viable food crop in the future. I mean, we think it's crazy. There's so much wheat grown in the world and so much corn and potatoes and all that. But it's not out of the question that we could have a major disease strike those crops for which we wouldn't be able to find resistance. In fact, there are two diseases striking bananas right now that are proving pretty difficult to deal with. And just before the turn of the century in 1999, there was a disease that struck wheat originally in Uganda and is now spreading across the Mideast into India and other countries. And for a long time, there was no resistance there. It was a disease that is mentioned actually in the Bible, associated with plagues and such. So this is really very often a race. And we don't read about it on the front page of the newspaper, and we've been really, really lucky. There you go, that's it. We've been very lucky to keep ahead of it, but we've only kept ahead of it because we have these seed banks.
In the seed banks, withdrawals, how often do they happen?
Oh, tens, hundreds of thousands of times a year if you look at all the seed banks around the world. Now, Svalbard is the backup for all of those. And obviously the management plan to be efficient and not very costly was not that a researcher or a plant breeder would go up to Svalbard to find a sample that they needed. They would get it from the institute that deposited it in the first place.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I just got a text from Glenn, and let me share the screen, which I think is a great photo. They are standing in front. That's North Korea's.
Yeah.
Great photo. So every country has in some ways participated in giving you seeds, majority of them.
Yeah, just about. And if you, of course, seeds have been spreading all over the world for a long time. And if you think of where the seeds originated, I think we've gotten seeds from 249 countries. That would include some countries that are extinct now. So,
and are those seeds the property of the country?
Yes, they are. And that was one of the key breakthroughs I think we had. So we wanted to sidestep any controversy problem about property rights, including intellectual property rights. And so the government of Norway signs a contract with all the depositors. And that contract says, you deposit seeds here, we'll do the best we can to conserve them. They're your property. We're not even going to open the box that they come in. And if you want them back, we'll send them back to you.
When we say box, we're looking at something that looks like, this actually is a picture from Lloyd. Everyone's now sending us a picture. That's all it looks like. It's not sexy on the inside. It's storage racks of seeds.
It's like a warehouse, yeah.
That's what it is. It's a warehouse of seeds from those countries that, again, are documented and cataloged in a specific way to where you guys have all those backups. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there are information systems around this, and just to give you a sense of scale, we now have more than 1 million distinct samples there.
Wow.
And each sample would be on average 450 to 500 seeds. So it might be the biggest living collection of biodiversity in the world now.
So my girlfriend and I are getting prepared for possibly the second wave. So we want to get yeast to make bread, flour to make bread, and a bread maker. But we want to do hydroponics. We want to get seeds. Seeds are actually very difficult to get a hold of right now. And it seems like people are starting to get educated on this next direction. That is, how do we become self-sufficient?
Well, everybody's at home right now, and those who have a piece of land are inundating seed companies with seed orders.
Wow. It's an interesting time. It's a great time for you. Tell us, if you were the president of all the plant seeds, what would your State of the Union, how would it start right now? Is it a good place for plants today, fruits and vegetables, or is it a sad state for the world of seeds?
It's a little both. I think we're much better off than we used to be, partially because of all the things I mentioned a few minutes ago, a treaty, an endowment fund, a seed vault, all those things. But on the other hand, it's extremely challenging. Last month was the 423rd consecutive month in which the global average temperature for that month, March, exceeded the 20th century average for March. 423 consecutive months. You can say that's a lot of coincidence. It looks like a trend to me. And the issue is that you can't expect seed varieties, our domesticated crops, to be adapted to conditions that they've not yet seen in their evolutionary history.
Right.
And so if we want our agricultural system to be adapted to what's coming, and the conservative models now predict that later in this century, the hottest growing years of the past will be the coldest, the equivalent of the coldest growing seasons of the future.
Wow.
Now, the hottest growing seasons of the past were deep trouble for agriculture. Production decreases, food crises, et cetera. But what if the hottest growing seasons of the past would be a great growing season in the future? Well, what it means is we really need a Marshall Plan for adapting agriculture to what's coming. And the great thing about that is, and I think the data is overwhelming and thermometers don't lie, but obviously, climate change, global warming is a very political subject in the United States. But the great thing about what I'm talking about is that this would be a great thing to do, and it would be cost efficient, productive to do it, whether or not there's any global warming. We need more investment, particularly, I would say, in the underinvested crops. And if you look at how much the world is investing in plant breeding, it's a pittance. I mean, bananas, I'll give you one example and then I'll make a broader point. Year in and year out, the fourth, fifth most important crop in the world in terms of revenue, of sales, is bananas. And there are 6 people who are breeding bananas in this world today. 6. So that's 6 people on whom bananas depend for their future. And there are many crops that don't have any full-time scientific plant breeders. And they're not out there in the field like a orchid in the jungle, dealing with natural selection. We are the natural selectors for our domesticated crops. So a lot of our crops, in fact, need the first scientifically trained plant breeder, and that you don't just snap your fingers and get that overnight. So we need organization. We have the collections, we have the raw material. Think of it as oil paint colors on an artist's palette, but we don't have the artists. Those are the plant breeders. And we need quite a large program to begin to train these and employ these and get them ready, or else we're going to see, I think, particularly in developing countries, some very, very big problems in the future.
So Cary Fowler is joining us, everyone. If you have a question, please put it inside the chat and then I'll bring you up. I'm going to go over to Mr. Richard Burke. Richard, you have the first question for Cary Fowler. Let's hear from you. Go ahead, Richard.
Hi, Cary. I was asking if GMO seeds are also included, such as the ones that Seminis division of Monsanto would create.
No, they're not in the seed vault. I should give you I don't know which answer, yes or no, would make you happy, but but the answer is no, and the reason is that Norway has very strict prohibitions on importation of GMOs, and the Seed Vault doesn't meet that criteria for putting them there. When I say no, a lot of people seem relieved that they're not there, but I must admit that 130 meters inside of a mountain in Svalbard, behind multiple locked doors at minus 18 degrees, generally inside heat seal vacuum packed packages inside locked boxes, is probably not the place where the GMOs would do their most harm. So, but we don't have any there. I think the good news in a sense is that, I mean, our business in Svalbard was not to predict what diversity would be important in the future. It was simply to conserve diversity. And, 500 years from now, people can figure out the answer to that question. But we can get virtually all of the diversity that are contained in GMOs in other non-GMO varieties and store them in Svalbard. So to have them there wouldn't bother me. To not have them there, it doesn't bother me either.
So Cary, we have other questions that are coming through. Let me just give you an idea. Our next question is going to be coming from Glenn, and I just want to share a picture of Glenn getting bit by a polar bear. So that would be Glenn. Glenn, what is your question for Cary?
It was a very traumatic experience. Hey, Cary, it is great to see you again.
You too.
That trip was one of the most memorable experiences of mine and my wife's life, and very educational. I learned so much about crop diversity and how important it is to the sustainability of our species, of humans and everything connected to it. What are your future plans, or what do you think should be the future plans besides just seed vaults? Should there be more seed vaults? What do you think is the best future to be able to preserve crop diversity?
Well, thanks, Glenn. Good to see you.
You too.
I don't think we need any more seed vaults. I think one is enough. The seed vault backs up all the other seed banks, but you could say the reverse, the other seed banks back up the seed vault. So I think we have enough redundancy built into the system. If I were younger and I had as much energy and time left as I had when 40 years ago, I think the one thing I would do, I would say, well, let's figure out a way to model what kind of climate conditions are going to be existing, particularly in developing countries, for the so-called minor crops, which collectively occupy a gigantic amount of land and are typically highly nutritious crops, but low value, and they don't have any plant breeders or seed sources. So those crops are going to have to evolve. Well, how do they evolve? They don't evolve unless the farmers practice natural selection and unless the farmers have something to practice it on, in other words, diversity. Mm-hmm. So I would do what the United States did in the 1800s. The United States is the native home of almost no important crops. Jerusalem artichokes, cranberries, walnuts, a few other berries, hops, that's about it. So how did we come to have crops that grow all over the United States? How is it that wheat is grown in all 50 states of the United States now? And the remarkable answer is that in the 1800s, the United States government, through the patent office, by the way, because the U.S. Department of Agriculture grew out of the U.S. Patent Office, which because agriculture was an inventive art. It still is. It assembled seeds from all over the world, and it sent them out in tens of millions of packages a year to farmers for testing, for experiment. Not enough to plant your whole field. You're not going to starve if the crop doesn't do well. But as a farmer in the 1800s, you would grow some of these varieties. The good ones you would save the seed for the next year. And if you were really good at seed saving, maybe you actually became an entrepreneur and sold seeds to your neighbor. And that's where actually our seed companies, many of our seed companies came from. So I guess the short answer, Glenn, is that I would empower the millions of small farmers in developing countries to become their own plant breeders, to adapt their own crops for climate change, since I don't see any practical way of getting a lot of scientifically trained plant breeders or companies involved in a market for which, the customers don't have much money.
Great question, Glenn. Thank you so much. Let's go over to Lloyd, who was like I said, Lloyd was insanely instrumental in making this happen. Lloyd, what's your question for Mr. Fowler?
Hey, Cary, good to see you again.
Hi, Lloyd, you too. Great to see you. Thanks for putting all that together in Svalbard.
I want to do it again so bad.
Me too.
So my question is around global warming and what's going on in Svalbard. It's pretty clear to everyone that lives there that global warming is having an effect. And in fact, I read that the Seed Vault actually was in danger of, I don't want to say flooding, but water was seeping into the Seed Vault. So what do you think the long-term sustainability of the Seed Vault being in Svalbard is going to be? And what are they doing to safeguard that particular?
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, the Arctic is warming faster than just about any place on the planet. And I've seen it very dramatically in Svalbard over the years that I've been going there. The Seed Vault originally wasn't built to be watertight. We didn't frankly think we would need it to be. And so there was always a little bit of water that would come in at the top part of the tunnel. You'll remember sort of more or less at the entrance. It would run down the tunnel, and we had 2 pumping systems that would pump it out. It never really endangered the seeds, though a journalist got a hold of it and wrote a pretty amazing, sensational article and made it sound like the Seed Vault was flooded. But what the Norwegian government did recently was they took the technology from the North Sea oil platforms, where they have sleeves, that go down deep into the ocean to house their drills. And they basically reconstructed that tunnel using the sleeve technology. So the tunnel now is totally watertight. And they increased the generator size for the cooling system, I think, by a factor of 7. And they did all kinds of fancy things in the mountain above the Seed Vault to actually freeze the mountain down even more. So one thing I tell people is that, yeah, the permafrost is in danger up there, and there are real problems. But if you want to have a Seed Vault that takes advantage of natural cooling, you got to put it somewhere, and it's all relative. And when people say, well, how is global warming affecting the Seed Vault? I tell them it's affecting it the same way it affects the freezer in your kitchen. If outside gets 2 degrees warmer, the freezer in your kitchen's got to work just a tiny bit harder. And that's the case in the Seed Vault, where right now we start with about -5 degrees Celsius. That's the natural temperature in the mountain back there. And we lower it down to the optimal temperature, which is -18. So maybe in the future it's -3 instead of -5, or it's 0 instead of -5. I don't know. But the cooling system will kick in, and we'll still take advantage of the relative cold nature of it.
Hey, Cary, question from me. Let's go after this whole issue. You touched upon it. Banana disease, since it is, I believe, the largest fruit crop now, especially to Americans, oranges and bananas. What is the solution when it comes to something like that? When bananas now have this insane virus that's plaguing it through all of Latin America and even now even Africa?
Yeah. Ken, that's a really tough one, and I'm not sure what the solution is. Bananas are a really hard crop to breed. I mean, typically, you want seeds and you get pollen and you transfer it from one to the other. You've probably never bitten into a banana with a seed, right? Has anybody? But every once in a while they produce one. And of course, there are these primitive varieties of bananas. But the 6 banana breeders that I referred to recently, just in this little talk, they are really special people because it takes something like 20 years to breed a new variety of banana. And that's with no guarantee that what you produce after 20 years of work is really gonna be okay in the marketplace. So somehow, if we want a banana industry, either the industry or consumers or government or someone has to say, well, you know, this is a gigantic industry. We bail out other industries that arguably are maybe less important to sustainability or food security. What are we going to do for bananas?
So there's no solutions, what you're saying right now.
Unless we get lucky, you know, it's going to take more science. And by the way, there are, you know, tens of millions of people in Africa for which banana is their staple crop, like rice or potatoes would be for other people.
Let's go to Nathaniel. Hey, Nathaniel, who is also on the trip. Nathaniel, he looks different. He's lost weight and he's hip and cool. But Nathaniel, what is your question for Cary?
Hey guys.
Hey.
Hey Cary, thanks for taking the time. You're absolutely a complete rock star. And thanks for taking the time to share it with us.
Thank
we are
you.
extremely lucky to get you.
We communicate every once in a while through Facebook, so it's good to see you.
You too, and I'm glad that you are happy and healthy. Yep. So I have a few questions, but one of them is, what is those other two vaults? I'm always so curious. I know it's a kind of silly question, but those other two vaults in there, there's a lot of, you know, on the internet, there's all kinds of rumors and things about them, but are they ever going to be full of seeds, you think? And if you already have so many seeds from so many countries, is it you're going to get more from those countries, or what's the plan? What's the strategy with that?
Okay, well, I'll give a little context to that question. When we built the seed vault, we built everything with some redundancy planned in because, you know, we make mistakes and all that. I made an estimate of how many unique varieties existed in the world, and then we built enough storage space to store 3 to 4 times that many, just in case I was wrong. Evolution continues and new varieties crop up and such. So at the end of this long tunnel, there are 3 vault rooms, and we currently have seeds in one of them and 2 are empty. I haven't actually seen stuff on the internet about what we're doing in those other 2 rooms. One has some empty boxes in it and some new shelving that we could use if we need it. And the other one is totally empty, but there have been some really wild conspiracy theories on the internet, just incredible ones. But I don't think we will ever use all 3 rooms. I think maybe if I live long enough, we'll start to use the 2nd room. But I might have told you when you were up there that when they were building the seed vault, the guys building it, you know, pretty rough, hard guys, tunneling machines and all this, they were very, very proud of that 3rd room, the one that I don't think will ever be used. And they asked me when it would be used. And they were proud of that room because they take pride in their work, and they were chiseling, you know, solid stone room. And they thought that they had made the walls particularly flat and straight, and they just thought it was a thing of beauty, and they were very proud in that. So when was it going to be used? And I told them I didn't think it would be used in the next 5, maybe 10,000 years. And they got a very dejected look on their face. And then I said, but hey, think of it this way. Is there anybody you know or is ever going to come along anytime soon that has built something that's actually designed to be used in 5 to 10,000 years?
That's amazing.
And then they got quite proud.
So cool. That's very cool. Can I, when we were up there, I remember you mentioned that you had some favorite seeds and they were particularly important to protect. Do you still have some top seeds on your list? Sorry, I'll get off after that, but I'm super curious.
Yeah, no, I do. And they're still there. And I actually am one of the few, if only, people in the United States growing some of those seeds out here in the garden. Not that I got from Svalbard. Okay. I got from the depositor.
Hey, I'm going to mention a few different crops, and I want you just to tell me, I know they're all important, but when we look at biodiversity and crop diversity, where we're at when it comes to these different crops, okay? So first one is just overall corn. What's the state of corn?
The state of corn is pretty good, though. You know, I'm not sure how it's going to fare with climate change.
Okay, let's go with wheat.
Same thing. We have, back to corn for a second. There's more economic investment in corn than any other crop. There are more plant breeders in corn. There are seed companies that their entire business depends on corn. So I'm pretty happy with corn. Wheat is a bit more of a public sector crop, and so at the whim of governments more than corn.
Okay, let's go with rice. State of rice.
Rice, we have more than 125,000 different varieties in Svalbard right now. So again, I'm pretty happy with rice, and there've been some really interesting things that have been done recently to help adapt that crop to different environments, both to excessive heat and to flooding.
Potatoes?
Potatoes, now it gets dicey.
Why is that?
Well, harder to conserve crop. Doesn't produce seed very easily. We generally conserve that with tissue culture, though there are seed collections in Svalbard. More expensive, as I mentioned, and it's just a difficult, it's going to be a difficult crop, I think, in the future, but very important.
I mean,
less diversity, probably less diversity. We have fewer samples of potatoes and rice or corn.
it just seems like you go to Peru. I mean, that's the staple in Peru.
That's where potatoes originated in the Andes.
How about a cassava?
Cassava is a great crop and could be more important in the future. It's not a terribly nutritious crop, but it fills the belly,
Right.
and it's pretty good in a wide range of environments.
Soybeans?
Soybeans is a Chinese crop. There's always been a lot of interesting geopolitics between the United States and China and a few other countries, Brazil in particular, to get soybean diversity out of China and into the hands of American and Brazilian plant breeders. Hard to know exactly what the state is in China, but we have a decent collection in the United States.
Let's go with sweet potatoes and yams. I know we said potatoes, but let's go with sweet potatoes and yams because they're a separate type of crop itself too, right?
Yeah. And both of those are really important crops because they're highly nutritious. Yams are a crop that I often talk about because they're a staple crop in Africa. They also, like bananas, have only about 6 plant breeders working on them. And there are about 40 million metric tons of yams that are grown in the world today, most of it in Africa. And I asked an intern that who's now a professor in Norway to come up with a visualization of what 40 million metric tons of yams would be. And what he came up with was that it would fill all the boxcars in North America.
Wow.
Railroad boxcars. So that's a lot of food. And so you can say that a lot of people depend on yams for their existence, but yams only depend on 6 people for their existence.
What do you mean by that?
The 6 plant breeders that are working.
Wow. No, I noticed something.
It seems like it's out of balance.
Yeah, you're right. I noticed I see something in a lot of cereals. What's it called? Sorghum?
Well, sorghum is a great crop. It's one of my favorites. It's an African crop originally, and it's one of the most drought tolerant crops that there is. And it has the distinction, well, having grown up in the South, Ken, I love sorghum molasses. You know, we have to put molasses on our biscuits. That comes from sorghum. African crop came over with slaves. But it has the distinction of, at least in experimental terms, we do experimental aging and such to figure out how long will seeds last in the seed vault if we just lock the door and walk away. And sorghum has the distinction of being the longest lived of all the seeds that we know about. And we estimate that it's 1,600 or so years.
So you're saying it's the most durable of anything out there. It can withstand the
As far
most.
as we know, though there have been some date palms recently, once or twice that have been discovered that germinated after, well, not that long, but yeah, 19,000 years is a long time.
Someone just told me it's very popular in the vegan culture. And how about plantains? I know it's not something that's massively huge in North America, but plantains around the world are huge.
Yeah, well, the institute that works on bananas also works on plantains. So those crops are somewhat interchangeable. Not too many people working specifically on plantains, but they're planted all over Asia and other places. And yeah, an important crop.
We hear a lot about hemp out here because everybody wants to be in that space. When you
Yes.
look at the hemp space, it's not something you're going to eat per se. It's a great material. What's your thought on hemp?
Well, we, we used to get inquiries about whether we had marijuana in the seed vault. And I always tried to avoid that because in the early days, I just didn't want people to get started on that. And I wanted them to take the seed vault seriously and all. But I think I've told you about the story of the letter, the postcard I got one day.
Tell us.
So the seed vault actually gets mail, so people will sometimes write to me, Svalbard Global Seed Vault, Norway, North Pole, whatever, and it ends up there. And I'll never forget, I guess I gave an interview to some journalist, and I said erroneously, I'm not sure if it was on purpose or not, but I said, no, there wasn't any marijuana up there. In fact, there are, I think, 6 samples of hemp, of marijuana. But anyway, that circulated around the marijuana folks. And I got a ton of mail, including probably my favorite letter ever from somebody writing up at the Seed Vault. And it was simply a one-liner. And I've always thought that I could accurately imitate the guy's voice in this one sentence, which in the one sentence was, "Don't forget the weed, man."
Hey, Cary, I did ask you to send me a bunch of pictures before we end up.
Yeah.
I wanted us to go through a couple of them real quick. This is one of those images that you sent me that really gives you how beautiful the seed vault is. And by the way, this picture could have been taken at 2 o'clock in the afternoon if it was in the middle of December. And that's one thing you do experience is that daylight and nighttime effect during different parts of the year.
Yeah.
So there it is. And then this is that inside shot that you showed us of those actual racks. Great.
That's one of the 3 rooms.
Right. Now this is your place. This is your personal passion. I asked you to send us a bunch of different images that are from you, from home. What are we looking at here?
A bunch of squashes and pumpkins and squashes and pumpkins.
You've grown all these.
Yeah, my wife is really more responsible than I am.
It's crazy.
By a long shot.
This right here, to me, is a dream come true. I love watermelon. You have this is incredible. How were these?
They're great. We grow many different kinds of melons. My wife just published a book called The Melon, and that's her favorite crop. And so we grow a lot of melons, and we had this staircase going up the side of the house. And so we just decided to make a kind of a watermelon waterfall.
Wow.
And,
Cary, can you pick out a good watermelon? Can you actually?
Yeah.
What's your secret?
Well, the Crimson Sweet was bred in Tennessee at an experiment station that my great-grandfather founded. So I'm pretty proud of that one. But the watermelons that are at the bottom of the stairs, the 2 on the bottom step, that's called Moon and Stars. And that watermelon typically has 1 or 2 big splotches of yellow, the moon, and it has a lot of little dots, the stars. And that's a really nice watermelon.
Wow. All right. This is beautiful right here. You have a massive property, don't you? How big's your property?
It's 200 acres.
Crazy.
So this just a kind of a flower garden and herb garden, and that's my nice dog, Wally, who's asleep at my feet at the moment.
And this is
This is a rare breed of cow that we have. It's the breed is called a red pole cow. It's the product of two extinct British breeds. One was a milking breed and the other was a beef breed, and they bred this red pole because they wanted a dual purpose. And we find the cow very gentle, and it's a great mother. It gives birth without needing a vet, and it gives birth to a small calf, so it doesn't need the vet. But then the milk part of its heritage, it gives a lot of milk, and the calf grows up very quickly, and it's just a beautiful breed of cow. This is kind of a gourd pergola. We create this little walkway every year, and this was kind of early in the season, but as it gets later, you would see these gourds hanging down, and you would sort of wind your way through it. It's just
It's beautiful.
Yeah, we have wild turkeys on the farm.
Have you ever eaten a wild turkey?
No, I haven't, but they're around.
It looks good. How many people do you have working on all of these acres?
Well, it depends on, what's going on seasonally, but it's, 3-4 people. We've got about 2.5 acres of intensive vegetable and fruit gardens, and then I've got my apple trees, and that's.
And what are we looking at here? Are these gourds?
These are that's melons. That entire expanse, I think, that you see is just melon varieties.
And we're not seeing soil. What are we seeing it on top of?
Yeah, we put down this black cloth that keeps the melons off the ground. We find it better for both weeds and insect control and moisture, keeping the moisture in.
House.
It's just the farmhouse. That's an old apple orchard that we have.
An old apple orchard. What's that mean?
Well, this one's about 25 years old.
But everything's fruiting. It's still,
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And greenhouses.
Greenhouses.
They're beautiful.
Start stuff. Yeah, this is an apple that I rescued. It's the only one that I can really claim. I discovered that this was, or had reason to believe that this was an extinct apple variety, and I, through some luck and research and various things, I found an old orchard in Virginia that still had 3 trees of this variety. And I went up one January and talked the orchard owner into giving me some twigs, and came back and grafted them onto rootstock. And now this is a variety that's pretty popular and is sold by a number of nurseries, but it was down to the last three trees, and if they had gone, we wouldn't have this variety. This is possibly, by the way, a variety that Charles Darwin had in his orchard.
Wow. And there's all your different varieties of apples.
Yeah, it's not all of them, but they mature at different times of the season. And so I just I harvested a bunch at one point and laid them out so people could see. And you see some, like there's a big one in the back row that's virtually black. I think that's probably an apple called Arkansas Black. And they just come in all different shapes and sizes, and taste and aromas and colors on the inside and outside.
We have 2 more pictures to go, but real quick, if you made an apple pie, do you do one straight apple, or is it a mixture of a few?
I made one 2 days ago, and I used a mixture, but if I had to use one variety, it would be an old British variety called Bramley's.
Yeah, okay, that's the one. This house looks incredible, and the dog, by the way, looks like a great partner.
He's good.
And are you canoeing much?
A little bit, yeah.
I love canoeing. And then this right here, the winters must be beautiful.
That was taken, I think, last week. Unfortunately, we've been having this weird weather, so that's from the living room, or from the dining room, looking out on that lake that you showed us.
Cary, we got just a few moments left. Last words for everybody that's watching this and will watch this. What seeds can you plant with us? What's the takeaway for us?
Well, again, I try to be humble about this, but I think at my age now, looking back, okay, if I did anything important, how did it happen? Why did it happen? And I think I always thought in big terms, but I was always very practical and took one step at a time. And I was very stubborn and persistent. And I also think if you're dealing, as I had to deal with, a lot of different partners in a lot of different countries, that the art of diplomacy is important, and it revolves around integrity and transparency. You got to give people the straight story. You fool them once in that business and you're out of business. So I think I was not, the brightest college student or anything like that. And I'm not a genius, and, ideas don't float down from the sky into my head. But I spend a lot of time thinking about how to solve problems instead of trying to figure out who to blame or who to beat up on. And so I think if you spend a lot of time trying to think of how to solve problems, and you're ready to work with people, and you don't give up, especially you don't give up, you can do some things.
Cary Fowler, thank you so much for being
Sure,
part
thanks,
of
Ken.
tonight's incredible Metal Connect, and thank you for being part of the Metal family.
It's good to see a lot of my friends tonight.
Bye, Cary. Thank you.